Welcome back to another episode of Always Another Game. I am excited to have you here. Before I dig in today, I just want to remind you that I don't have a cost to listen to the podcast, but there is a fee. If you take anything away from our fantastic guest and her story today, please do share it. Please like and subscribe to the podcast. We only need to help one person today. And if that isn't you, maybe you can help that next person. But today we are going inside an athlete's mind that I've never experienced before. And we are going to find out the highs and lows of her story and how that's benefited not only her life, but the fact that she is now a digital nomad running her own business. Everybody, I have with me today, Caitlin Atkinson. Caitlin, how is it going?
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me today. I'm good. And calling you from sunny Spain. So much for my digital nomad life.
Yeah. And you know, we've just talking beforehand that, you know, you have been a few places. You're actually heading back to Lisbon. Did you say tomorrow?
Yes, exactly. I've booked a bus. That's as far as I've gotten. I don't know if I'm actually going to stay there, but I probably will. Lisbon's a very nice place to be. So
it is. I've only been once. My brother's stag do was actually in Lisbon, and we got so lucky. Like right in the square, they had the massive football fan zone for I think it was the Euros. Was it the Euros at the time? And obviously England were playing, and it literally like that whole experience made the whole stag do. But yeah, Lisbon is it's a lovely place. It is a lovely place. Now the reason I have just said that I've never experienced and going into an athlete mind like yours is I actually had to Google your sport. Okay. So not only is Caitlin, and I'm going to get her to tell a little bit more about you, but she's a digital nomad that runs her own business now. You were an equestrian vaulter.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, if you're assuming right now, don't assume, okay? Because when I Googled it, the first image, my face was, what is going on here? So I will leave that for now. But what I'd love everybody to know before I get into anything is who is Caitlin Atkinson?
Yes. So I'm Caitlin. And I started my own business as a social media coach just recently, like literally 4 weeks ago. It's been in preparation for a while, but as you just already mentioned as well, the whole digital nomad thing, so that's kind of a life path I decided I want to pursue. And with that, starting my own business, which is of course not a requirement, but for me, it's something I've been wanting to do like for years.
Yeah.
And you know how sometimes you kind of have those little things in mind and you're like, oh, you know, maybe I'll do that one day. What if? And then maybe not. And then suddenly things just start falling into place and you're like, maybe I should just like hop on that train and go with the flow. That's basically what I've been doing for the past year, pretty much. That's when my whole digital nomad journey started. And unfortunately had to leave the equestrian vaulting behind along the way. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell, I guess.
Yeah, and I love that with everybody I've spoken to so far, there is a common theme of things just falling into place. And I think that's life. I call it accidental intent. There's always an intent to what we do. You said there, you know, you wanted to do it, but things just suddenly fall. And now 4 weeks in, you have your own business. You know, you're able to tell everybody about it via this podcast. And I just feel like every action we take has an intent behind it. We met on an app called Discord. Which is I kind of describe it as there's a lot of solopreneurs there that are there to kind of like share ideas and support, and that's where I go. It's like, oh, who can I talk to this about? And I go over to Discord. So yeah, it's amazing where you can find people. But I don't know, I'm on the edge of my seat right now. Can you please tell everybody what the heck is equestrian vaulting?
So equestrian vaulting is basically gymnastics, or more like acrobatics, on a horse, like a real life horse though.
Yeah.
So the horse, like when you do it as competitive sport, the horse, it canters around in a circle. There's like a person in the middle holding onto the horse and managing the horse. And then you can either do it as a team, as a double, or individually. I used to do all three. and you go into competitions, and then you have like compulsory exercises. So you jump on the horse and everyone does the same bunch of exercises, and you get like marks on them. There's like judges around. And then there's a freestyle, which is a lot more fun because you can basically do anything possible. You can have, so in the team, you can be up to 3 people on the horse at the same time, and you basically just pile each other on top of each other. Like, so you'll have like, you'll have like a base, so someone who's like maybe a little bit stronger and like holding, being supportive. Then you'll have like one person standing on the horse, and then you'll have like a smaller person on top of the standing person doing like God knows what up there. Yeah, that's kind of equestrian vaulting in a nutshell. It's really fun.
it sounds it, and it looks it. Like when I googled the pictures, the first thing I noticed actually on the ones I looked at is like how many people were watching for a start, like in the background in the crowds. I'm like, it's obviously a high sport. Just because I didn't know what it was doesn't mean that it's when I say ice hockey, people go, that's not that very big in the UK. Well, yeah, it is. Some of the arena teams get 5,000-6,000 people. Like, there's a lot of people. But then secondly, I was like, yeah, okay, one, that's a real horse. Two, like, yes, this is full on gymnastics. But then when you start saying 2 or 3 people, like, this is like, that must be an insane skill, an insane discipline for you to be able to achieve that. And I guess working with the team, trust must be a huge trust element in it.
Absolutely. So I remember like when we used to train for competitions, especially like the freestyle part, right, where you go on with like 2 or 3 people. We used to learn our freestyle with our eyes closed. So we would know exactly where to put your hand, where your leg goes, where do you go, where do you need to hold on to someone, just to like know each movement, and we'd also like count through it, it's like a choreography basically. So you have like counts 1 to 8 or something, like 1, you'll put your arm here, 2, you'll do this, 3, you do this, because it's not just like the gymnastics part, there's also like a choreography behind it. So it's all with music. So you've got like all the like artistic part there as well, and like you want to make it look nice, and you've got like all these arm movements, and it's got to be synchronized. And but yeah, so it's just like obviously a lot of like team building. We used to spend like so much time together. I mean, we train like almost every day, spend all weekend together. Like, we were our best friends, our family. So you kind of build that trust that way as well a little bit, and then I think it's easier to have that on the horse as well. But yeah, absolutely, it's a very special thing for sure.
It is. If anybody listening, my face right now is in complete kind of awe and shock, because I understand what it takes to play ice hockey, which a lot of people think is fascinating, but for what you do is completely alien to me, and I can just understand what you had to go through to be able to do what you did. Would have taken an insane amount. But then the question comes, how do you even get into equestrian vaulting? Like, you see horse riders and you see jumpers and jockeys. How do you get to that point?
So I mean, there's obviously the typical people of like, oh, look, there's a stable down the road, and they offer this thing, so let's go and try it out. My story was a little bit different. So I was actually, as a kid, I was super, super scared of like anything and everything. Like, I would not leave the house. And then my like kids therapist person kind of recommended to my parents I should be doing something with animals. Some kind of, like a therapy form or something with animals. So, and how it is. So my mom had a friend, and she had a friend, and she had a horse, and, in a nearby stable. So I kind of tagged along there. But it was very like super easy going. This was nothing competitive or anything. It was just like kids having fun, doing a little bit of equestrian vaulting on the horse. And I think pretty quickly, I was like 5, I think, at the time. I wasn't in school yet, or had just like about started school. And they figured out that I was apparently quite good at this.
Okay.
Or had like some kind of talent for this
Yeah.
whole sport. So they moved me to a new stable that actually had competitive teams. And at the beginning, I remember like literally crying before having to go to the training, because I did not want to go. I did not like it. But my parents just kept going, like, no, you're going, you're going, you're going. Because I don't know. I mean, I don't have kids, so I can't say from a parent's perspective. But now looking back, I can imagine, like, despite me crying and being like, I don't want to go there, they knew that I was enjoying being on the horse and like
Okay.
enjoying being with the other girls and the other kids.
Yeah.
And that at the end of the day, I was actually quite happy to do
Yeah.
that, and that I was actually good at it, and that it was helping me to get over all these fears that I was having. Yeah, so that's basically how it started. And then, yeah, my coach at the time, she also was like, yeah, I think she's good at this, so we'll keep her and she can join the team. And then pretty quickly I moved up. You have like different levels. You start at like a bit, I know, like a beginner level, and then there's like intermediates, and then like a more expert level, and like different age groups. And I moved up pretty quickly there, and yeah, and then we just took it from there,
Yeah.
basically.
And through these conversations, I'm seeing a lot of people mention parents and coaches,
Yeah.
and the importance of that. And there is that fine line between pushing somebody into something they really don't want to do and encouraging somebody in something that they know, maybe that you didn't know. Your parents saw something that you didn't. What was that? Where did you notice a changing point? Do you remember the point where you went, actually, no, I do really like this and I'm excited to go rather than dreading?
Yeah, and I think it was mainly related to people I met along the way. Like one of my like former best friends at the time, we were both like super shy kids, and we met at this like summer camp. We used to have like Equestrian Vaulting summer camps, and
Okay.
we kind of met there, and I think we just bonded, and we went through this in our entire career together. Oh yeah, pretty much most of it. And kind of were able to support each other. And I think, like, looking back at it now, those are like some core memories, like, of the journey where I'm like, oh, that was a moment where I actually felt really comfortable with it all.
Yeah.
And I liked being around the stables, and I liked being in the team. And yeah, I think that was probably a turning point, like just having some other people with kind of similar background, or like you meet people where you feel like, they're kind of on my wavelength, they're like my people. And
Hmm.
there was something like that, although I was still really young at the time. But I guess you still kind of notice it even as a kid, like these are
Yeah.
people I work well with, and
Yeah.
I kind of fit in here. I'm not
Yeah.
like the odd one out.
And all sport has the lone wolf
Yeah.
moments. There are times where you are alone. But what I've noticed, and I have spoken to a lot of individual sporting athletes at the moment, is that there is always more to it. There might
Yeah.
not be tens of people, on the sidelines or on the pitch with you, but you do have people, and that might be one friend, one coach that believed in you, one parent that gave you the best advice.
Yeah.
And the fact that you had somebody there that changed it from this fear of, that you could have stopped you,
Yeah.
really. It turned it into an enjoyable experience. And
Totally.
I think that carries over to life in business, is there is always that somebody. You may not have met them yet, but there is somebody there that will support you, that will root for you,
Yeah.
that will make your experience better, if you're just willing to do your lone wolf time as well as accepting support and help, because we all need it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think the lone wolf time, it's hard. Like, you kind of need to get used to that as well. But
Hmm.
obviously you learn through it, like either by being put into it, like I put myself in that situation on purpose, like now, for example, we're starting a business, or if you're like put into that situation by external factors, by, having your parents push you into like the sport, for example, like encouraging you to go there. Um, yeah, you just learn by doing it. And like now looking back, I'd always do it again. I'd always go back,
Hmm.
do the same path, because that's what made me who I am now. And
Hmm.
also someone who's like very comfortable being that lone wolf person. Like, I do not mind being on my own, which is why I
Hmm.
actually find it really hard to like accept help on the
Yeah.
other hand. So that's like the part that I need to learn now. It's like a lot of people feel like, oh, I don't want to be lonely, I don't want to be alone, although those are two separate things as well,
Hmm.
in a way,
Yeah.
right? Feeling lonely and actually being alone. But then I find it a lot harder to actually accept help or ask for help than like being
Hmm.
alone and figuring things out on my own. I do think that came through the sport as well. There's a big part of that, like just like pushing through on your own bit. Yeah, it's just learning along the way.
Life is all about learning, but this is what I wanted to get from this podcast, is that there are so many lessons that we already have learned that we may have forgotten. And when we do look back and reflect on some of our life successes, because I'm sure most of us have had a very interesting childhood, wherever that's been, 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, I'm sure there's been some very interesting things, but we do tend to forget. I did. It was one of the, the name of the podcast, Always Another Game, was an ice hockey lesson that clicked in when I was being a parent one day. And that woke me up to all the other things that I'd learned that I'd forgotten. So we're constantly learning, and, sport is grueling at the toughest of times. Whatever we choose to do, there is difficult elements of it. You had to do that with an animal. Okay.
Yeah.
How did you find that? Because I guess there is an element of control there. If you can share some of the tips that you had for communication with the animal, but they're unpredictable as well.
Yes, and yes. So I guess, I come from a very privileged position in this sport. I think for other athletes like equestrian vaulters, it's a little bit different. So I was lucky to be with a coach who had her own horses, and we used to train our own horses. So we'd buy them, I don't know, super young, or because they were difficult for other equestrian sports, or you can get like horses who are specifically trained for this, but we used to get like more like the odd ones out. Okay. Interestingly enough, we get all these horses and they turn into like the most amazing like partners. And so we were able to train them ourselves. And I think by going through that process together, you kind of form that bond as well. So you do trust them, but as you already said, there is still always that part of not being fully in control. And it has like cost us like winning competitions sometimes, when a horse had its own mind and was like, no, I'm not feeling this today. And you're like, but why? What did I do to you? I'm only so nice to you. So you do still have that. And interestingly enough, so I started surfing last year. Super random side topic, but I always like to compare these two things. And I've come to the conclusion, like, one of the reasons I think why I enjoy surfing, or like why I'm attracted to it, let's put it that way, why I'm attracted to surfing, is having that, is not being fully in control of it. Because like with the equestrian vaulting, having a horse, yes, I have my coach in the middle, she kind of is in control of the horse. Like, it's her job to make sure the horse keeps running in like a consistent canter and doesn't like just stop, or I don't know, do weird lines or whatever. But still, at the end of the day, you never know, right? The horse has its own mind, right? So I think that's why I'm actually attracted to like stuff like surfing as well, because there's always that little bit of like, I cannot control it. Obviously, the ocean is a lot bigger factor than a horse, but still, like, you get my point, right? So that was definitely interesting. But also what I really like about it is like learning to work with an animal, and learning about the animal, but also like learning to feel the animal. So, there'd be like certain exercises on the horse that, depending which horse I was working with, I couldn't do because I knew they just did not like that, or that would kind of bring them out of balance too much and they'd get really unhappy. And it's like little things like that. Or I don't know, like a lot of people, there's all these like horse therapy things as well. And it's all about that the horse picks up your energy. So if I'm scared going into the competition, the horse is going to be scared too. And it's just going to be a big mess. And that's a really, really interesting thing as well. And you see it all the time. Like, a horse will just follow your lead, but you've got to be able to be that lead in that situation, right? And be like confident.
And you do see it all the time. You see, a lot of these athletes that do work with horses or any kind of animal, you see the relationship. A lot of people that don't maybe understand do scrutinize it, but there is a relationship there. babies or
Yeah.
your partners.
Absolutely.
And there can be relationships formed. Look at anybody that has a pet. You form a relationship. A lot of people will speak that them, they'll call them your daughter or your son. That there is a relationship there.
Absolutely.
Now, I don't know exactly what happened, but your hand was forced, right? You didn't decide when you retired. Did that have anything to do with the horse itself?
Well, a little bit, but it was interestingly that I just mentioned this whole like, oh, horses, you can't do certain exercises on. That was the reason why I ended up having a really bad knee injury, or like the start of a long journey of multiple knee injuries. Let's put it that way. Because I was helping out a different team. It wasn't actually my home team. So we were also, we would also be able to like help out at the teams as well. And they needed someone to jump in for a competition. And this was like actually a team like on a different level than I was. So they were like, oh, you can just come in, do your bit, help us out. Perfect. I'm like, yeah, sure, I can do that. Because like you get to a point where you can literally jump on any horse and do your exercises, although every horse is a little bit different, has a little different heights, their canter is different. You're just so used to it, or like so used to training on different horses. I was like, no problem. And I knew beforehand about their horse that this horse did not like certain things. So for example, if you have like a horse and then you have like the back and the front, and some horses do not like you being on their back. They'll just kick you off. They do not care. They'll just like throw you off.
Yeah.
And this specific horse was a very young horse. It wasn't that well trained yet. It was still learning a lot. So you also don't want to overwhelm it. But as I'm just the one helping out, you kind of just go along and do whatever the coach wants you to do. And you're just like, yeah, right. It's your horse. You've got to know what it can do and what it can't do. So they let me go up and do my exercise. And that was already tricky for the horse because it was having like troubles balancing it out. I was kind of like standing, kneeling on its neck. It sounds a bit wild, but it actually isn't that wild. It just sounds a bit wild. And then they sent another girl on at the same time during the freestyle on this back part that a lot of horses don't like. So the horse just tried to throw us off. But because I was secured on the horse, so I couldn't fall off, so I could do my exercises, I kind of got stuck and I didn't just fall off. So it's like weird to explain, but I ended up like, I was kneeling on my knee while twisting it. And it all just got a bit of a mess. And I had to literally wait until they got their horse back under control because I couldn't get off the horse because my foot was stuck on the horse.
I can feel it. Yeah, I can feel that. Yeah, it's tough because sport, a lot of time people do end up out of sport because of injury. And yours started because of that. And I think a lot of people, that was one of my biggest fears when I played, especially when I was younger, that I wouldn't be able to play because I was injured. And it wasn't until late in my career that I actually did get injured seriously. And for me, that was a revelation because I learned so much through that injury about rehab and what I was able to do. I actually came back fitter from an injury because I worked with experts. I worked with a fantastic company near me, the ex-Premier League football physios. And I learned so much. And I was actually fitter because they were able to train me hard around my injury that I would have never have known.
Yeah.
Because of that injury, it led you to a different career. It kind of forced your hand a little bit. But also it's led you to traveling because you traveled quite a lot. You traveled quite a lot with it, right? Because you represented Germany internationally. Do you feel that gave you the itch to travel with work?
So I think the travel itch, it never went away. There was a time like stopping the sport, like due to all these injuries and things, and then going into studying, and then like having your first job, your second job. It was always there that I wanted to travel more and travel again. I just didn't know how, because the whole like digital nomad thing was absolutely not on my radar yet. Even just doing home office wasn't a thing really, until like where I was living in Germany, like before COVID, like 2020, home office wasn't something we were doing. Not at all. We used to like coming to the office. It was part of the culture, right? And it still is, like, it's still great. But that's like, and that was the time when I met the first people who were like working and traveling. I was like, oh, that's clever. That's what I want to do as well. And it took me a while to get there, you know, from like finding a company where you can do home office to finding a company that'll allow you to work remotely for maybe a few weeks a year, to then being able to create my life so I can travel all year if I would want to. It's not that I want to always, but you know, to have that possibility and be flexible enough to do that. So yeah, but it definitely influenced me, like the traveling during sports influenced me in that way that I'm not scared of traveling on my own. So I know that, like, you know, that can always be a bit of a factor for a lot of people, like going off on your own, or like waiting for someone else to join you. And you're like waiting and waiting and waiting and not getting anywhere because you're not finding anyone to go with you or who can go with you. I never had that. Like, I never had that fear. I've had like many fears in my life, but that was not one, because I was so used to just traveling on my own, or like with the team, but like without parents, without, you know, a big friends group. We were just like the team and our coach and the horses. Mainly.
And you mentioned fear a lot, and you were, you know, you've said you were shy, extremely shy. You've gone from extremely shy, talking about your fears, to, you know, you're running your own business, you're traveling the world. You did acrobats on top of a horse, like probably one of the most confident things you would need to be able to do. But I know that that came with some challenges, having that the physical side of your life was scrutinized a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you had to deal with that side, the physical appearance side of your sport, and how you coped with that?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good topic. Yeah, the whole confidence thing, connecting it to that. So yeah, obviously being a gymnast, kinda, you know, there was a lot of like, oh, you're too heavy, or like, oh, you're too big, or you're too tall for this, or you know, all of that. And then also a big thing. So that was like coming from a coach's side. Well, then also I think coming from inside, from internally, is this: you're wearing these like super tight leotard things in competitions. And you know, we're like, I mean, obviously I started very young, but when you're around like, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, onto like 16, 17, you're very aware of like your body, or start to become very aware of your body and your appearance. And you're like, oh, I don't feel comfortable like this, like right now. I just do not. And I mean, for me, that wasn't the biggest problem, but I know many, many people who ended up getting very ill through that, because they tried to be as skinny as possible, you know, because you were like wearing these leotards, and then you have like a coach telling you too heavy, and obviously there's all these things coming in together. And it took me like years, even still, like I'm 29 now, so I'm still like working on it to get that positive body image back. It's a lot better, and I've worked a lot with a coach and a therapist, and like, you know, part of what we worked on was that, for sure. But it wasn't until like 2 years ago where I remember telling my therapist, I was like, oh, I've noticed like I didn't do any sport this week, and I don't feel bad about it. Like, you know, I've stopped forcing myself to work out every day, to like, because I thought otherwise I'd gain too much weight and things like that. And that was a big breakthrough moment when I realized like, wow, it's actually starting to work. Like all the work I've put into fixing this, or like resolving that issue for myself, just to live more confidently and happily, and you know, that was a big moment, I think.
It's amazing how long it can take. And
Oh
obviously
yeah.
the way I would word it, and what you've done is you've kind of gone through a reprogramming phase, that
Yeah.
you chose to not believe what you were told anymore and believe that there was something else. And again, reaching out for help, we spoke that about not being the
Yeah.
lone wolf.
Yeah.
And it's taken that rebirth, you know, and just that one day you had that click. And I've had that click too. I had a coach. I was told all the time I was too slow. I needed to lose weight. One coach came up to me and said, "Look, you need to stop eating crisps." And I was like, "I don't eat crisps." And that was it. Like that, I did, you know, that was my nutrition information. And I didn't know any better. I was a kid.
Yeah.
But yet these things do stick with you, and it shows you that we
Yeah.
spoke about great coaches, and we spoke about great parenting and great friends. Along the way in sport, you may come across, through no fault of, you know, potentially of their own, they may just be inexperienced and not understanding, but you
Yeah.
may come across people that have that negative impact.
Yeah.
How then did you turn that into a positive?
So yeah, that was a process for sure. I think it first went from like somehow coping with it into a lot of anger, because
Hmm.
I remember my coach used to tell me as well, oh, you know, you're always the best when you're really angry at me. I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to always be angry. Like that's kind of
Yeah,
annoying, you know,
yeah,
but because I get really upset with her and just be like, right, I'm gonna show it to you, you know, like
yeah,
I
yeah,
can
yeah,
be better than that. So I think there was a lot of that. And then eventually from that going into, ooh, I feel so neutral about a lot of things. I don't want to be like this anymore. And that then took me on this journey of like figuring out what are all these things happening in my mind? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling that way? Where is it coming from? And how can I change it around?
hmm,
So obviously, yeah, a lot of work went into that, a lot of work with myself and like a lot of reflection, and like changing my perspective on things, and it just needs time, I think, as well. Like
yeah,
this is nothing that just changes from one day to another. You're like, right, tomorrow I'm going to change this, and suddenly everything's changed. You just mentioned it, right? It's like if you go through reprogramming, and it just needs time as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
I
I think
think,
that's what a lot of people forget, is think, you know, these stuff that you were told, you weren't told
yeah,
once.
yeah,
You were probably told multiple times, and then maybe another coach or another person said it that then stuck it in a little deeper. And it does. You know, you won't resolve your problems in necessarily a month. Even a year is still a short period of time compared to a decade of these beliefs, and it does take time. But you know, I say I loved what you said there. I don't really love it, but when the coach said about, you know, you perform better angry, I call that kind of like the broken plate
yeah,
syndrome. Is that, you know, you smash it, you can put it back together, but it won't be the same. You know, so if they've done something that's upset you, that's caused the anger, okay, you may have performed it, but you've now got a little dent, you've now got a crack, and that doesn't
yeah,
replace. And over a period of time, that system breaks, that system doesn't work anymore. I remember coaches that, you know, they used to bench you to try and get you motivated to go again.
oh
Yeah, but
yeah,
you've benched me, I'm not forgetting what
yeah,
you've done. I'm annoyed, and
absolutely,
I'm good, and I
absolutely,
can't take out on you, but I can take it out on them on the ice.
yeah,
But I haven't forgot what you did. And if you do it again, there's another crack. And eventually that
yeah,
system's not going to work anymore. And eventually, you know, players that I've played with just go, I'm done. I'm absolutely done. So, yeah, okay, I can see it being a coaching tool, but it's not one that lasts. It's not
yeah,
one that helps. And this is what we have to
absolutely
remember
not.
as coaches, and what we do now, and even you just sharing your story to
Yeah,
anybody that wants to know, is that you're 29 and we're still having this conversation.
yeah,
And
absolutely. It's
that's the
yeah,
power of what we do and how we live, is it can have such an impact on somebody's life. You're changing it now, you've changed the perspective, you've grown from it, and you're now utilizing it and having the confidence. And again, having the confidence to go in your own business it's admirable, in my opinion. I've done it, I live it. It's hard.
yeah,
You know, and you get to do that now through the growth that you've done. It could have potentially, would it have changed if they told you that, you know, that you were the best thing since sliced bread and hugged you? You may not be in the position, but that's why we take the
no,
good and the bad
yeah,
and implement it. So what was the decision to go solo? Where did that come from?
With like
In
work
business.
and everything.
In business, yeah.
So it's been something, it's one of those things like with the traveling that was always there in my mind, like as something like one day I want to be working for myself. I didn't know what or how, I just knew I wanted to do that because I enjoy working like startups and smaller companies, and then I ventured off in some bigger companies, and I noticed
Okay.
like having so much structure doesn't quite work for me. So I was like, right, maybe I could just like work for myself. Then I can just try out everything and like, fail, try again, fail, try again, but I'll be doing it for me. And I'm the one to blame, I don't need to blame anyone else. I'm not dependent on anyone else. I can do it for myself. And like having all these thoughts over time, definitely kind of pushed me in that direction. And then again, one of these situations of, well, then you meet someone and you have this conversation and you have that conversation and you get connected with this person, and suddenly you have a business coach and you're kind of figuring out, wait, how can I start my own business? So I'm going to quit my job at the end of this year. And then it just goes off. And I think like it got serious pretty much exactly 1 year ago when I was working remotely for the first time and traveling, and I saw someone else. Like I had a two to 3 months time frame of like traveling in Europe and working remotely. And during that time, I met another girl who like she just like posted a reel on Instagram, and it was like, oh, I went traveling for 2 months working remotely and then noticed I actually don't want to go back home. So I need to figure out a way to change this. And I was like, how did you do that? Like, I want to do that too. I just don't know how. And then we have again this topic of like asking for help and asking other people, like just being active and being like, at least asking the question, like, how did you do it? It doesn't mean I have to do the same path or go the same way and do the same steps, but at least you're like in that bubble and just like gathering information. And that's kind of what started about a year ago. And then like, summer last year, I was like, right, I'm going to do this. I don't know how or what it's going to be, but I'm going to do it.
It is honestly, I'm loving these conversations because everyone now there's some sort of link, because I had a female bodybuilder on, and same thing, social media led her to a bubble, and she was like, okay, that's what I want to do. And that is the power of social media. And now you get to do that every single day as your job. And I think social media gets a bad rap. It gets a really bad rap, and there is a toxic element to it. But we have so much more control over our social media than I think a lot of people realize. What you read, the algorithm will throw you what you read, what you like, what you comment, blocking, unfollowing, following people that inspire you. You can create a better platform. And your inspiration to go to this next level came from somebody else living the life that you wanted to live, but you actually realized it was possible. A lot of people just dream. But you said yes.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one of those things you kind of need to wrap your head around is like, wow, it is actually possible. Like anything you like dream of, it is actually possible. Like someone else has done it, most likely already before. Not everything, but like most things someone has done. There is someone who has done it. So like, why shouldn't I be able to do it? So
So if you were talking
simple,
to somebody,
but it's a process, right?
Everything is simple, isn't it, when you really kind of break it down? But if you were talking to somebody that was you a year ago, right now, that's listening, what piece of advice could you give them that you maybe learned from your time in equestrian vaulting, in sport, or just in business? If you could give them one piece of advice right now that would help them today, what would that be?
I think my most important learning from my time in equestrian vaulting was definitely having determination. Like if you really want to get to a certain goal, just keep going. Like take one step after another. It might take longer, it might go a bit quicker, you never know, but just keep going. As long as you keep like keeping that momentum going, you'll get there. And if it's important enough and you really, really, really want it, you're going to put in the work to get there. That's how I got through the Equestrian Vaulting. That's how I got successful there. And I believe, and that's what I'm doing right now. Like, that's what I'm taking into my business now. Of course, I'm not where I want to be yet. I'm still very far away from that. But I know that as long as I keep going and keep taking at least one little step, even when I'm not feeling good, there's still, maybe one little thing that I could maybe do. And be it just like sending out a message to someone on social media, or I don't know, in my case, like doing a post. I could even schedule it, so I wouldn't even have to do it the same day. But just to keep at it. And I think the other big thing is to not let other people tell you what you can do and what you can't do. Like, who are they to tell you and to judge you what's possible and what's not possible, especially if they haven't done it themselves yet. That's been one of my biggest learnings, like from now, the past like weeks and months, like being like fresh in like my own business and stuff.
Spot on. Love that. Because again, that's social media, right? Isn't it? It's that you get a lot of advice from people that haven't lived and experienced it. And I think what better people to actually tell you a little bit more and guide you than an athlete that has been there and done it and lived it. So that's absolutely brilliant. Caitlin, if anybody does want to find you and learn more about what you do, where would they find you?
So obviously on social media, they can find me. You can find me on Instagram. My name is literally just Caitlin Atkinson with an underline in between. So you can find me there. Feel free to always like send me messages, so reach out there. Then of course LinkedIn. That was like, I think LinkedIn was actually the first connection, how me and Shaun ended up in the same Discord group. LinkedIn. So you can obviously find me there as well. Also, my name is Caitlin Atkinson, and I also have a podcast as well, which is called Caitlin, My Life and I. So you can also find that on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. And now also as a guest on your podcast.
Okay, just very quickly then, because I actually didn't know you had a podcast. Just very quickly, what is that? What is it about?
So my podcast is basically about anything and everything, is what I like to say. I started it also a year ago, roundabout, as like my first little own project, to basically just put my thoughts out there and things that I have like in my mind or that are going on, like topics at the moment, just to kind of create a platform for other people to react to it, to listen to it, to know you're not alone with certain things, and to just open up a conversation basically. And
Perfect.
So it could be like
I will
anything and everything.
I will check it out. I will check it out. Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. I was really excited for this one because it was very unique. So I can't wait to get this out there. As a reminder to anybody that listens, I do steal this last line from my favorite ever podcast, but I do believe there is a fee to the podcast if you take anything from it, because it would be a crime for you not to share the information and hold on to it to yourself. So any likes, subscribes, shares, it is always welcome. But thank you for everybody coming and joining me on Always Another Game podcast. Thank you for coming once again. Thank you, Caitlin. And we will catch up with you all on another episode. Take care.